The restaurant was a cathedral of quiet money, a place where the air itself seemed expensive, thick with the scent of polished silver and whispered fortunes. At 68 years old, I sat at the center of it all, the guest of honor at my own victory lap. The sale of Callahan Logistics, the company I had built from a single truck and a stubborn dream into a regional powerhouse, had just netted me $58 million. The number should have felt monumental, a seismic event in the story of my life. Instead, it felt like a weight, a final, staggering sum that had transformed me from a father into a target. Across the starched white linen, my son Kevin and his wife Brenda performed their roles with the polished ease of seasoned actors. Their smiles were brilliant, their toasts eloquent, their eyes wide with a reverence that didn't reach their souls. "58 million, Dad," Kevin said, shaking his head as if the number was a religious concept too vast to comprehend. The crystal of his wine glass caught the light, a tiny, glittering prison for the expensive burgundy within. "It's incredible, a true testament to your entire life's work." I offered a slow, measured nod, taking a sip of my cranberry juice. "My doctor's orders. Your heart is strong, Jack, but it's not invincible. No more whiskey. You're a cranberry juice man now. A small sacrifice for more time. Ironic, considering what was about to happen." I looked at my son, searching for the boy who used to ride shotgun in my first truck, a toy car clutched in his small, grubby hand. That boy was long gone. In his place was a man of 38, his eyes holding the cold, hard gleam of entitlement, a look I had financed with every tuition payment, every buy-laid-out business venture, every mortgage I'd co-signed. My late wife, Alicia, had seen it years ago. "Be careful, Jack," she'd whispered, her voice heavy with a mother's sorrow. "He sees you as a bank, not a father." I had dismissed it as a mother's worry. Now her words echoed in my mind, a prophecy I was too blind to heed. Brenda reached across the table, her hand, cold and smooth as marble, briefly covering mine. "We are just so proud of you, Jack. Really. Now you can finally relax, enjoy the fruits of your labor." Her smile was a perfect, placid curve. "Let us take care of you." The phrase hung in the air, slick and insidious. "Let us take care of you." It sounded less like an offer and more like a corporate takeover. The conversation drifted into a shallow stream of their plans. A villa in Tuscany, a new limited edition sports car, all discussed with the casual assumption that my wealth was now their liquidity. They were spending my legacy before the ink was dry on the transfer documents. I felt the familiar, dull throb of disappointment in my chest, the one that had become my constant companion in my son's presence. I had built an empire on sweat and integrity, two currencies Kevin had never learned the value of. After the main course was cleared, a sliver of seared fish that cost more than my first week's earnings, Kevin stood, his smile widening into a theatrical display of affection. "Brenda, my love," he announced, extending a hand. "They're playing our song." It was a classic slow ballad, another prop in their elaborate performance. They moved to the small dance floor, a picture of conjugal bliss, their bodies swaying in perfect, hollow synchrony. I turned my attention back to my glass, the deep red juice like a pool of liquid rubies in the fine crystal. That's when I saw him. A man in a sharp, dark security uniform was approaching my table with a quiet, purposeful stride. He was older, maybe in his early 60s, with a spine straight as a steel rod and eyes that missed nothing. He stopped beside my chair, leaning in slightly, his voice a low, confidential rumble. "Mr. Callahan," he said, "I don't mean to alarm you, sir." He paused, his gaze flicking toward the dance floor and then back to me, sharp and unwavering. "I was standing near the bar. I saw your son. When he was coming back to the table a few minutes ago, he thought no one was watching." He leaned closer, the scent of starch and integrity on his uniform. "I saw him pour something from a small vial into your juice." The world did not tilt. It did not shatter. It simply stopped. The gentle piano music faded into a distant hum. The clinking of crystal became the sound of shattering glass in my mind. I stared at the man whose name tag read Marcus. His face was a mask of professional duty, but in his eyes I saw a flicker of genuine human alarm. He was telling the truth. I did not gasp. I did not look toward my son. 40 years of navigating business crises, of staring down ruthless competitors and weathering economic storms had forged in me an iron control. A coldness so profound it felt like liquid nitrogen flooded my veins. I looked down at the glass in my hand. The cranberry juice, my symbol of a healthy, extended life, was now a chalice of poison. Every instinct screamed to hurl it across the room, to roar my betrayal to the heavens. But I did none of those things. I looked at Marcus and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. A silent message passed between us. Message received. Thank you. He straightened up, touched the brim of his cap in a gesture of quiet respect, and melted back into the background of the restaurant, a ghost who had just handed me back my life. My mind, cold and clear now, began to connect the dots I had refused to see for years. Kevin's impatience with my old-fashioned ways, his constant, probing questions about my will, his barely concealed frustration when I joked about living another 20 years. It wasn't just greed. It was a sickness, a monstrous, calculated evil. The $58 million hadn't been a cause for celebration. It had been my death warrant. The music ended. Kevin and Brenda returned to the table, their faces flushed with fake laughter and real anticipation. My own son, walking toward me with a smile minutes after trying to murder me. The cold inside me solidified into a diamond-hard resolve. As they sat, I clutched my stomach, letting out a soft, convincing groan. "Dad," Kevin's voice was laced with a perfect imitation of concern. I shook my head, crafting a pained mask for my face. "No, it's my stomach," I rasped, letting my voice weaken. "Just seized up. An old problem. I think I need to get home." Brenda's hand flew to her mouth, a masterpiece of theatrical worry. "Oh, Jack, do you need a doctor? Let us drive you." This was the critical moment. I could not let them near me. "No," I said, waving a dismissive hand. "It'll pass. I just need to lie down. I've already called an Uber. It's waiting outside." Kevin stood, helping me from my chair. His touch on my arm felt like a snake coiling around my skin. "Are you sure, Dad? We don't mind." "I'm sure," I said, my voice firm despite the act. I steadied myself against the table, and in that motion, my hand accidentally brushed against the tall glass of cranberry juice. It toppled, the red liquid spreading across the pristine white linen like a bloodstain. "Oh, clumsy me," I muttered. While they were distracted, fussing and calling for a waiter, I grabbed the thick, damp napkin that had absorbed most of the spill. It was heavy, saturated with the proof of my son's treachery. Under the guise of wiping my trousers, I folded it and shoved it deep into the inner pocket of my suit jacket. I didn't wait for another word. I turned and walked away, my steps measured and sure, though my legs trembled with a fury I refused to show. I didn't look back. I didn't want to see the look of satisfaction I knew would be dawning on their faces. 15 minutes later, I was in the back of a silent Uber, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and white. My hand was in my pocket, clutching the damp, damning cloth. The sweet, cloying scent of cranberry filled the air, now the smell of betrayal. I felt no rage. Not yet. That would come later in crashing, debilitating waves. Right now, all I felt was a profound, chilling clarity. The hunter had become the hunted. The trap had been set for me, but as I held the evidence in my hand, I knew with absolute certainty that they were the ones who were already caught. This was not the end of my story. It was the end of theirs. And I, Jack Callahan, the man who had built an empire from nothing, would be the one to write the final chapter. The poison is in the glass. The son is a predator, but the old lion is not yet dead, and he has just been handed the one piece of evidence that can destroy everything. Subscribe now, because the vengeance that comes next will be colder, more calculated, and more devastating than any poison. You will not believe the surgical precision of a father's wrath. The Uber pulled away. its red taillights dissolving into the river of late-night traffic. I stood frozen under the jaundiced glow of a street lamp, the damp, folded napkin a lead weight in my coat pocket. My home, a sprawling, silent testament to a life I now knew was a beautiful lie, was just down the street. Its windows were dark, offering no comfort, only the ghosts of a past that had been systematically poisoned. I could not go back there. To walk through that door, to see the photos of a smiling Kevin on the mantel, to breathe the air Alicia had once filled with her laughter, it would be a surrender. It would allow the grief and the shock to consume me, and that was a luxury I could not afford. Grief was for the innocent. What I needed now was the cold, hard certainty of facts. I turned and walked, my footsteps echoing with a new, grim purpose against the sleepy pavement of my suburban street. I moved away from the manicured lawns and silent houses, toward the harsh, fluorescent heart of the city's downtown core. The night here was different, alive with the wail of distant sirens and the low, constant hum of indifference. I needed its sterility. I needed a place where truth was measured in parts per million, not in the shattered pieces of a father's heart. I knew a place, a private, discreet diagnostic lab tucked away in a medical arts building, one that offered 24/7 service for clients who valued speed and anonymity over insurance paperwork. Callahan Logistics had used them for years for sensitive employee screenings. The automatic doors hissed open, admitting me into a lobby that was as cold and silent as a tomb. The air smelled of antiseptic and ozone. A young technician sat behind a thick pane of ballistic glass, his face bathed in the blue light of a monitor. "I need a full toxicology screening on this," I said, my voice unnaturally steady as I placed the plastic-bagged napkin in the transaction drawer. "I need to know every compound it contains. Organic, inorganic, everything. I need it done tonight. Money is not an object." The technician, whose name tag read Ben, slid the drawer back with practiced efficiency. He examined the sodden cloth with detached professionalism. "A Priority 1 comprehensive panel is expensive, sir." "Just do it." He processed my black credit card without another word, then slid a clipboard through the slot. "I'll need a contact for the encrypted results. 4 hours." I scrawled my private email address, the one not even Kevin knew about, and turned to leave. The sterile waiting area with its plastic chairs and outdated magazines felt like a holding cell. I couldn't sit. I needed to move, to outpace the storm of emotions brewing inside me. I found a diner a block away, a place that existed outside of time, with sticky vinyl booths and the greasy scent of home fries. I ordered a black coffee I would never drink and sat by the window, a specter at his own wake. The city's nocturnal life played out before me, a shift worker smoking wearily, a couple arguing in hushed, sharp tones. Normal people with normal problems. I envied them. My mind, a CEO's mind trained for crisis management, began to function with icy precision. The first primal instinct was to call the police, to report the crime, but I dismissed it instantly. A police report would become a public record. The story would leak. Logistics tycoon Jack Callahan poisoned by own son. The headlines wrote themselves. My name, my company's name, Alicia's memory, all of it would be dragged through the fetid mud of public spectacle, a feast for tabloids and gossips. No. This was not a wound to be cleansed in the light of day. This was a cancer, deep and familial, and it required not a policeman's handcuffs but a surgeon's scalpel. A private, precise, and terminal excision. I thought back, sifting through a lifetime of memories, searching for the rot I had missed. Kevin as a boy who could look you dead in the eye and lie with placid innocence. The neighbor's window he'd broken, steadfastly blaming another child even with the evidence in his hand. The teenage years, a trail of borrowed items never returned, a casual disregard for anyone's property or feelings. I had called it immaturity. Alicia had called it a character flaw. She had tried to warn me. I had been a fool, a hopeful, love-blinded fool. The most chilling thought was the vial. Marcus had been specific. A small vial. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was premeditated. My son had researched my health. He had sourced a specific substance. He had carried that vial to the restaurant, a calculated weapon in his pocket. He had smiled, toasted my success, all while administering what he believed was my death sentence. The sheer, soulless calculation of it was what finally broke through the ice in my veins, letting a trickle of white-hot rage seep through. My phone buzzed on the Formica table. An email. The subject was a string of numbers. I opened the encrypted file, my heart a cold, hard stone in my chest. The document was a lexicon of chemical names, but the summary at the top was written in brutal, simple English. Substance detected, metoprolol tartrate. Concentration, mg per 100 ml. A clinical note followed. Metoprolol is a beta blocker prescribed for hypertension and cardiac conditions. Standard therapeutic dosage is 25-100 mg. The detected concentration is exponentially higher. For an individual with a pre-existing cardiac condition, ingestion would almost certainly induce acute myocardial infarction within 1-2 hours, the symptoms of which would be clinically indistinguishable from a naturally occurring fatal heart attack. A heart attack, of course. The grieving son, the tragic but not unexpected death of an aging, wealthy father, the perfect, untraceable murder. The last, desperate hope that this was all some horrific misunderstanding evaporated, replaced by the sterile, unassailable truth of science. The document in my hand was a death certificate that had, by a miracle of a stranger's decency, never been filed. I looked out the diner window. The first faint hint of dawn was bleeding into the edges of the sky, a new day I was never supposed to see. I felt no anger now. The rage had cooled, compressed into something denser and more dangerous, a profound, icy resolve. The time for grieving the son I had lost was over. It was time to deal with the monster he had become. I picked up my phone, but I did not dial 911. I dialed the private, memorized number of the only person on earth I trusted without question. It rang twice. Walsh. Her voice was clear, sharp, and completely awake. "Cynthia," I said, my voice flat. "It's Jack. I need to see you now." There was not a second of hesitation. "My office, 30 minutes." The line went dead. Cynthia Walsh's office was on the 40th floor of a glass tower that speared the city's skyline. The private elevator opened directly into her sanctum. She was standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, a silhouette against the bruised purple of the pre-dawn, a half-empty mug of black coffee in her hand. In her late 40s, she had her father's steady gaze and a mind that operated at a speed that left most people behind. Her father, David, had been my first partner, my best friend. I'd watched Cynthia grow up, watched her become a legal prodigy. When David died, she seamlessly took his place as my counsel, my confidant, the daughter of my heart. She was family, forged in loyalty and loss. "Jack," she said, turning. Her sharp eyes scanned my face, missing nothing. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "The ghost of my future," I replied, taking the leather chair opposite her desk. I didn't soften the blow. I told her everything. The stilted dinner, the security guard's warning, the spilled glass, the damning lab report on my phone. She read the toxicology report, her expression hardening into a mask of cold fury. She placed the phone down gently, her knuckles white. "That son of a bitch," she whispered, the words a low, dangerous vow. "He finally did it. He finally crossed the line." She stood, a coil of contained energy. "First call is to the district attorney. We'll have a warrant." "No," I cut her off. She stared at me, incredulous. "No, Jack, he tried to kill you." "And what happens then?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. "Headlines, a public trial. The Callahan name becomes a true crime punchline. Everything I built, everything Alicia stood for becomes a sordid footnote to my son's murder trial. Is that a victory, Cynthia?" The silence stretched. She understood. This wasn't about legality. It was about legacy. It was about justice. "So what do you want?" she asked, her voice softening into a strategist's tone. "This isn't about punishment," I said. "It's about a correction. a permanent, irreversible adjustment of his reality. Prison is too easy. I want to take away the one thing he was willing to kill for. I want to take away the money, all of it. I want him to wake up one day and find the world he was so sure he owned has vanished. A slow, dangerous smile touched Cynthia's lips. It was the same smile her father used to get right before he eviscerated a competitor. "I see," she said. "This isn't a criminal case, this is a demolition." She moved to her laptop, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "All right, Jack, we do this my way. We need a complete picture. We need to know everything. Every debt, every secret, every skeleton. I know a firm, ex-FBI, ex-IRS. They're ghosts. They'll have a full workup of their lives within the week." "Good," I nodded. "While they dig, I'll play my part." "Which is?" "The grieving father, the oblivious old man." I explained the phone call I was expecting, the seed I had planted about a large family trust. "I'm going to dangle the inheritance right in front of them. Let their greed make them stupid." Cynthia's smile widened. "A classic strategy. It always works." She looked at a framed photo on her shelf of her, beaming, standing between me and her father on a fishing boat. "My dad always said you were the best poker player he ever knew. He said you always knew when to hold, when to fold, and when to go all in." I looked at the photo, a pang of loss hitting me fresh. "He also said you were smarter than both of us combined." He was right. Her gaze snapped back to the present. "The plan is set. Phase 1, intelligence. Phase 2, the trap. You keep them calm and distracted. I'll handle the rest." As she turned back to her computer, I walked to the window. The sun was now a brilliant orange line on the horizon, burning away the night. The city below was waking up, oblivious. My son had started a war when he poured that poison. But here, 40 floors up, his father and his godsister were building the machine of his annihilation. The sun was rising on the first day of the rest of his life, and he had no idea it was already over. The call came the next morning, as predictable as the sunrise. I let it ring 4 times, composing my voice into a weary, fragile imitation of itself. "Dad, oh, thank God." Kevin's voice was a masterpiece of manufactured panic. "We've been calling all night. Are you okay? What happened? Did you go to the hospital?" I could hear the desperate probing beneath the concern. He needed to know if his plan had failed, or if it had been discovered. "Easy, son, I'm all right," I said, forcing a soft, dismissive chuckle. "Just a bit of a scare. Saw my doctor this morning." I paused, letting him hang. "He said it was nothing more than a bad case of indigestion, all that rich food. My stomach isn't what it used to be. He said it can sometimes feel like the real thing, a lot of pressure in the chest, but he ran some tests. My heart is just fine." The wave of relief through the phone was almost palpable. The tension in his voice evaporated. He wasn't listening to my words. He was listening for the absence of suspicion, and he had found it. "Are you sure that's all it was?" He pressed one last feeble check. "You left in such a hurry." "The doctor is sure, and so am I." I let out a long, practiced sigh, the sound of a man confronting his mortality. "You know, son, that little episode last night, it really got me thinking. You get to my age and you realize time isn't a guarantee. We need to make sure things are in order." "What do you mean, Dad?" The sharp, focused curiosity was back. "I've been on the phone with Cynthia Walsh this morning," I said, dropping the name like a jewel into his lap. "We've been discussing my estate. That sale, the $58 million, it changes things. It complicates things." "Right, yeah, of course." "And I've decided," I said, delivering the bait with perfect, casual precision, "that the best way to handle it is to set up a significant family trust, a very large one. I want to make sure that you and Brenda are taken care of properly. I want to ensure this money is a blessing for our family for generations to come, not a burden." Cynthia is drawing up the papers as we speak. The silence on the other end was absolute. I could hear the gears of his avarice grinding, overwhelming every other thought. A trust, an ironclad, legally bound fortune. Dad, that's incredible, he finally stammered, his voice thick with naked excitement. You don't have to do that, we're fine. The protest was so weak it was laughable. Nonsense, I said warmly, the benevolent patriarch. You're my only son, who else would I do this for? This is my legacy, securing your future. That's all that matters to me now. I don't know what to say. Don't say anything. Just stay close. Cynthia will need you and Brenda to come in and sign some preliminary documents in a week or so. We'll talk more then. For now, I need to rest. This old man is more tired than he thought. Of course, Dad, you rest, and thank you, really thank you. I hung up the phone. The silence in my study was deafening. I felt no joy, only a grim, chilling satisfaction. The performance was a success. I had used his own monstrous greed as a weapon against him. He was now a willing participant in his own downfall. He felt safe. He felt victorious. He would be looking for a pen to sign his name, not for the shadows in the corners. I had bought us time. Time for Cynthia's ghosts to dig. Time for me to build the perfect, inescapable trap. The game was now being played on my terms, by my rules, and my son had no idea he had already lost. A week passed in a disciplined, silent calm. I played my part to perfection, the gratified father basking in his son's sudden, cloying affection. Meanwhile, Cynthia's investigators moved through the murky waters of Kevin and Brenda's life like sharks. The report arrived on the 8th day, an encrypted PDF. It was a portrait of a life lived in a state of reckless, desperate fantasy. Total unsecured debt, $750,000. A dizzying array of maxed-out credit cards, Centurion Black Card, Visa Infinite. Their statements reading like a catalog of obscene luxury. 5-star resorts, $10,000 shopping sprees in Milan, a single dinner in New York that cost more than my first truck. But that was just the beginning. They had 2 luxury cars, leases 3 months behind. Repossession notices were imminent. Their sprawling house, the one I'd gifted them the down payment for, had a second mortgage taken out against it. They were 90 days delinquent on both. Foreclosure was weeks away. And then the private loans. High interest from the kind of lenders who don't send polite letters. Another $500,000 taken out to pay off other loans. A frantic, desperate juggling act. The grand total was a staggering $2.3 million in debt. They weren't just living beyond their means. They were living in a financial fantasy, and the walls were collapsing. The $58 million wasn't a jackpot to fund a dream life. It was a lifeline to save them from a catastrophic, humiliating ruin. They weren't just greedy. They were cornered, terrified animals. And a cornered animal will do anything to survive. My life had been a number on their balance sheet, and they had decided it was time to cash it in. The second report, 4 days later, was a dagger to the heart. It wasn't about money. It was about desecration. It contained transcripts. Brenda, using her smoothest, most cultured voice, calling high-end art galleries in New York and Chicago. My father-in-law is Jack Callahan. You may know his company. Unfortunately, Jack's health has taken a turn for the worse. He's on his way out. I'm afraid my late mother-in-law, Alicia, left a significant collection. He's tasked me with a private, discreet sale. She was selling off Alicia's soul. The paintings on my walls weren't investments to me. They were chapters of my life with my wife. The first small landscape we bought on installments. The vibrant abstract she bought the week she was declared cancer-free. Each canvas was a piece of her spirit, and Brenda was inventorying it, preparing to liquidate my wife's legacy to pay off her credit cards. Kevin was complicit. He was letting his wife circle his own mother's grave. The betrayal was so profound it eclipsed the attempted murder. This was a holy war. But the final report was the one that turned my anger into a block of solid, impenetrable ice. It was a scanned document, a medical power of attorney, granting Kevin full control over my health care. My signature was at the bottom. It was a forgery, a brilliant, near-perfect imitation, but a forgery nonetheless. The investigators had subpoenaed the hospital logs. Kevin had used this document to access my complete medical history, my cardiac records, my stress test results, my prescriptions, my allergies. He had obtained a blueprint of my body's specific weaknesses. And then, the internet searches from burner phones and library computers traced back to him. How to get medical records of a parent. Fast-acting heart attack-inducing drugs. Tasteless beta blockers over the counter. Lethal dosage metoprolol for 200 lb male with cardiac history. How to fake a natural death. Will an autopsy show metoprolol overdose? There it was, the smoking gun. The forged document was how he got the knowledge. The searches showed his intent. The lab report was the proof of execution. He had approached my murder with the detached, clinical precision of a scientist. The intimacy of it was the final, unforgivable sin. He had taken the private data meant to keep me alive and weaponized it. Any lingering sentiment for the boy he had been turned to ash and blew away. The man who had done this was not my son. He was a stranger, a predator. The cord was severed. I called Cynthia. Did you see it? I saw it. Her voice was tight. We have everything. It's time. Book the main conference room. Tell them it's for the formal signing of the Callahan Family Trust. Tell them to come prepared to celebrate. Her voice was grim. It's time for the reading of the will, so to speak. Exactly, I said, looking out at the clear blue sky. Except the only thing I plan on giving my son is the truth, every last damning piece of it. The day of the meeting arrived. The sky was the color of slate. Cynthia's 40th floor conference room was a chamber of power and judgment. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. On the table sat 5 thick blue folders, our arsenal. At 10 a.m. the door opened. Kevin and Brenda entered, radiating triumphant, giddy energy. They were dressed for their coronation. Kevin hugged me. I stood rigid, my skin crawling. Brenda kissed my cheek, her eyes darting to the folders. They saw Cynthia as the help. They sat, holding hands, the picture of a happy couple about to inherit a kingdom. Cynthia let the silence stretch. "Thank you for coming," she began, her voice crisp. "Before we proceed to any signing, there are preliminary items to address." She opened the first folder. Item 1. She slid the lab report across the table. A toxicology report from a sample retrieved from your father's table. It details a concentration of metoprolol tartrate approximately 25 times the lethal dose for a man with his cardiac history. Kevin's face went rigid. Brenda stared, confused horror dawning. Cynthia opened the second folder. Item 2. A financial summary landed with a soft thud. A full workup of your situation. 2 delinquent mortgages, multiple vehicle repossessions, combined unsecured debt of $2.3 million. Foreclosure is imminent. Brenda's hand recoiled from Kevin, as if from fire. Item 3, the third folder. Cynthia's eyes, cold as chips of ice, locked onto Brenda. A transcript of your call to the Halloway Gallery. "My father-in-law, his health has taken a turn, he's on his way out. You were preparing to sell your mother-in-law's art collection." Kevin looked at his wife, a mix of disbelief and accusation. "And finally," Cynthia said, her voice dropping to a deadly quiet. Item 4, the last folder. A forged medical power of attorney you filed to access your father's confidential medical records, and a corresponding log of your internet searches for terms including lethal dosage and how to fake a natural death. The silence was absolute, tomb-like. They were statues of terror. Brenda whispered, "This is a mistake." I spoke, my voice weary with a lifetime of disappointment. "There will be no family trust, Kevin." Cynthia delivered the final blow. The $58 million has been transferred into an irrevocable charitable trust, the Alicia Callahan Foundation. It will fund art grants and wildlife preservation. You will not see a single cent. The collapse was total. Brenda sobbed silently. I laid out their future. "You have 2 choices. Option 1. We call the district attorney now. You will be arrested for attempted murder, conspiracy, and fraud. You will spend decades in prison. I let the image hang in the air of their utter ruin. Or option 2. Cynthia slid a single, thick document and a pen across the table. You sign this. You relinquish all claims to my estate and your mother's. You sign the deed to your house, which I have paid off and is now owned by the foundation, over to me. You pack a single suitcase each and you walk out of my life forever. You never contact me again. In return, I do not press charges. This evidence goes into a vault. Violate the agreement and it goes straight to the police. I leaned back. You will have your freedom, but you will have nothing else. You start from zero. The choice was between a life in ruins and no life at all. I watched my son's trembling hand reach for the pen. He signed without reading it, his signature a broken scrawl. Brenda, her tears smudging the ink, did the same. They stood, robotic, broken, and walked out of the conference room, out of my life, leaving their greed and their future behind. The door clicked shut. That was 3 months ago. I am not in my quiet, empty house. I am standing in a small, bright art gallery. The air smells of fresh paint and hope. A young artist is explaining her vibrant, chaotic canvas to me. It reminds me of Alicia. I am smiling, a real smile. I used to think a legacy was something you pass down. I was wrong. A true legacy isn't what you leave to your family. It's what you leave in the world. By taking away a fortune my son hadn't earned, I gave him the only thing my money never could: the chance to build a life of his own, on his own character. His story is his own now. But more importantly, we took the dark, ugly thing his greed created and we transformed it. We turned a son's betrayal into an artist's first exhibition. We turned poison into paint. We turned a potential inheritance into actual opportunity. In doing so, I am honoring my wife not by preserving her memory in a silent house, but by letting her spirit fuel the dreams of others. I didn't find peace in revenge. I found it in purpose. This story reveals the ultimate truth. A legacy built on greed will crumble, but a legacy built on purpose will endure forever. Have you ever had to make an impossible choice to protect what truly matters? Share your story of difficult strength in the comments below. Your courage could inspire someone else to reclaim their own legacy.